Hello and welcome. My name is Erin Spink. I'm the National Manager of Volunteer Engagement, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the Chapter President Orientation. One of the joys of my role is that I get to liaise with the chapter presidents on a regular basis. And because of that, I know what a critical role that chapter presidents play within Crohn's and Colitis Canada. This orientation is intended to provide you with an overview of the key activities of the role, as well as helpful information and guidelines to assist you to be as successful and have as much impact as possible. So let's get started. What we hope you'll walk away with from this orientation is an understanding of the key priorities of the organization so that you can help align and focus local activities with them. And in doing so, we're all in the same boat, rowing in the same direction, and we have amplified impact. Also, it'll give you a sense of how chapters fit into the organization and the 4 key pillar areas of activity we ask every chapter to work towards. We're going to be providing some best practices on keeping a chapter functioning well and active, and finally, how we work together in partnership to achieve our mission. So the agenda, what we'll be covering today, a number of things, but they generally fall within 4 areas. A review of Crohn's and Colitis Canada, a look at what a chapter is, its main activities and functioning, your role specifically as a chapter president, including success drivers, and finally, best practices and resources to help you and your chapter. This is foundational orientation, and our hope is to have more in-depth training to come in the future on specific topics to provide a well-rounded training to support you in this very important role. Our promise, mission, and new vision are listed on the screen. We were founded by concerned parents who set in motion a bold course to find the cures for Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis. The few became many through the efforts of thousands of volunteers just like you, joining in on the mission from across Canada. Today, this legacy continues through all of you. You continue to bring our promise to life, and you're part of a powerful team. The largest group of community-based volunteers we have is through chapters, and so as chapter presidents, it's important that you're deeply familiar with our mission activities so that you're comfortable answering questions you may receive from people in your community about the difference we're making and helping others to stay current with our programs and activities too. Our strategic plan was recently updated after extensive consultation with volunteers like yourselves, donors, researchers, and other stakeholders. More than 100 conversations were had to inform our updated strategic plan. This graphic illustrates our key priorities, which I'll delve into more deeply on the next slide. Some of the key visual aspects of this image I'd like to draw your attention to include the fact that all of the pieces overlap, demonstrating that each one supports and reinforces the others, that volunteers, especially chapters, are key ways we activate our community and are foundational to our ability to connect with and empower the Crohn's and Colitis community. Our strategic priorities make it clear that delivering on our promise as a powerful team is key. Chapters play a key role in all of these priorities, either through your direct activity or as a result of your success, like providing key funding for research and patient programs. Chapters and other community volunteer groups can be proud that over 50% of all Crohn's and Colitis Canada revenue comes from communities like yours, through events like Gutsy Walk and chapter events. Your hard work is the engine driving our research, patient programs and services, and our advocacy and awareness activities. Without this funding, we simply would not be able to deliver on our promise, so thank you. By working together, we're improving the lives of children and adults living with these chronic diseases across Canada. The final priority, to support high performance and strategic action across the organization, is also very applicable to chapters. As key members of our team, along with staff, it's when we come together to focus on the mission and work in sync that incredible things happen. On the screen, you'll see a visual representation of our organizational structure. What you'll notice is that volunteers are both the foundation and the leaders, as well as being integrated throughout the entire organization, touching every aspect of our work. This structure also illustrates our layers of accountability. Ultimately, we are all accountable to our volunteer board of directors, from chapter volunteers to the president and CEO. For chapters specifically, accountability is to your staff partner, rolling up to the regional director. We'll get into decision-making later on and further explore what this looks like. Beyond accountability to our volunteer board of directors, as a national registered charity, Crohn's and Colitis Canada is required to work within mandated legislation via the government. In addition, through our accreditation with programs like Imagine Canada, there are best practices that help us be as effective and efficient as possible and instill confidence from our community and the public in the work we do. This means that sometimes we may need to enforce a specific way of doing something or ask you to stop doing something altogether. The legislation listed on the left-hand side of the table are key examples of laws we must work within, while the items on the right are best practices we strive towards meeting and exceeding in order to maintain our reputation and a caliber of work we can all be proud of. Let's briefly touch on each of these on the left-hand side. The CRA, or Canada Revenue Agency, has certain prescriptions for registered charities, which Crohn's and Colitis Canada is. For example, we must complete public audits of our finances to ensure we're spending donor dollars wisely and in keeping with our mission. This is one of the reasons why we only do tax receipting at the national office and why there are rules around what we can receipt and how it must be done. PIPEDA is the Personal Information Protection and Electronic Documents Act and is Canada's laws about data privacy. It makes sure individuals give their consent for the information to be collected and that companies have clear privacy policies. PIPEDA requires that we obtain clear consent before we collect, use, or disclose personal information, and we only use that information for the purposes for which we have consent, among other things. For example, this is why we cannot get patient details from GIs or hospitals and clinics. If you have paper or computer files that contain information about any employees, any clients, donors, or volunteers, your method of collecting, protecting, and using that information must comply with the Act. The Canadian Anti-Spam legislation, which is CASL, was developed to deal with electronic spam and has two main objectives. One, to limit the ability of companies to send emails that are unwanted or unasked for, and two, to prohibit and control unwanted downloads of programs onto people's computers. This means that unless we receive permission, we cannot broadly email, e-blast people who have attended a patient education event about fundraising without permission. The Canadian Human Rights Code ensures we do not discriminate against anyone, staff, volunteers, or patients. For example, this means there are questions we cannot ask when screening, so we have developed sample interview questions for potential volunteers and created an online application form which fit within these boundaries. On the best practice side, we strive towards a culture of volunteer engagement and philanthropy, which focuses on respecting those contributing so much to our work and creating partnerships. We meet and exceed the standards outlined in the Canadian Code for Volunteer Involvement, and we're only one of a small number of charities in Canada who have received accreditation through the Imagine Canada program's 73 standards in areas like financial accountability and transparency, fundraising, and board governance. So what is a chapter? Chapters are unique from other community volunteer groups in that they are part of our governance structure, with each chapter having one vote every year at our annual general meeting. As such, each year chapters identify a chapter voting rep to represent their voice at the AGM and vote on important organizational changes and decisions. As community representatives for Crohn's and Colitis Canada, chapters commit to protecting and enhancing the organization's reputation by operating in accordance with our business code of conduct, policies, and best practices like our Imagine Canada accreditation. Currently, we have 46 chapters across Canada who act as the local welcoming hub of Crohn's and Colitis Canada, intended as a gathering place for people and mission activities. We know that effective chapters are driven by a strong chapter president and team of chapter executives who lead the active involvement in the local community. Your role is to ensure that anyone connected to the Crohn's and Colitis community locally, whether through direct diagnosis or by supporting someone they know, are aware of and can benefit from what Crohn's and Colitis Canada can offer. Chapters are committed to maximizing and growing the impact they have on our mission through 4 key areas of focus: raising funds, community engagement, growing the volunteer base, and patient program delivery. Within each, there is a mix of expected activities that all chapters work on, like the Gutsy Walk, and a list of other projects and activities that contribute towards these 4 core areas, but are selected based on the annual plan you develop locally. Each chapter is at a different stage of development. It may take time to build the support required to be fully active across all 4 areas of focus, but each year is an opportunity to celebrate growth, progress, and the expansion of activities. Activity in all 4 areas, no matter how small, also benefits your chapter by offering a variety of activities and ways for people to get involved and share their skills. Resources on the volunteer tools page, like ways to involve volunteers, provides ideas for how to involve volunteers in each of these 4 areas and can be a great start to brainstorming your annual chapter plan, or if someone approaches you who has great skills, they may be the perfect person to lead the charge in an area where you don't currently have any activity. Chapters include a variety of people connected to it, some of whom are volunteers, while others are the people we are supporting or more broadly connected to us as an organization or to the cause. Chapter executive roles include the president, vice president, treasurer, secretary, volunteer engagement lead, community outreach lead, program and education lead, community fundraising connector, digital outreach lead, youth engagement lead, and Gutsy Walk chair. While many chapters will not have all executive roles filled, a goal of 4 executive members helps support local activities and succession planning. It's recognized that some chapters may be in transition or progressing towards that goal, and that's okay. All chapters are required to have a president to be considered active. The treasurer role is only required for chapters that require check signing authority. It is expected that all incoming volunteers will have completed a volunteer application form online if they haven't already. This helps us ensure we are connected with all chapter volunteers and can document their impact, as well as allow us to distinguish between those who are chapter members versus those who volunteer. These are distinct but equally important groups, and by confirming the nature of their involvement, we can report back to our stakeholders on impact and the community that exists. Chapters are the local face of Crohn's and Colitis Canada, and therefore should have an emphasis on welcoming newly diagnosed patients and their families to the organization, as well as helping them become aware of resources, tools, and support available. Your role as chapter president in helping ensure we're creating a friendly, welcoming, and patient-focused space and continuing to move forward chapter business activities is crucial. The chapter president is the main conduit for organizational communications and ensures that Crohn's and Colitis Canada's goals and mission are being supported locally. The president role is intended to work very closely with the local staff partner. Each year, the chapter president is accountable to ensure the following activities happen: that an annual chapter election takes place, that there is an appointment of the chapter voting rep for the annual general meeting or AGM, helping lead the conversations and dialogue required to complete and submit an annual chapter work plan, signing off on the code of conduct annually, and if you're coming into the role, participation in our background checks. You can see on the screen other role-specific core activities, as well as interactions where you might be working with other people. So for example, part of it is leading regular meeting planning that you're the primary lead on, but you would work with people like the secretary, programs and education lead, and all other chapter executives, to develop the agenda, if there's any programming, reaching out to other volunteer groups locally to gather updates for sharing, things like that. We know that successful chapter presidents have a few traits in common. One is that they work very closely in partnership with us as an organization and with their local staff partner. And that means open lines of communication, frequent conversation, and a real mutual respect. They help build an active and engaged chapter to meet local needs by touching base with people, finding out what it is that is desirable. They ensure the chapter is integrated with the community at large by helping make sure that connections are being made, that people are being met, whether it's yourself going out or making sure that your community fundraising connector is tied in with the business community, that the community outreach lead is out and about in the community, perhaps delivering presentations, things like that. You may not have to do it, but it's helpful. Your role is really key in making sure that it is happening. You're also key in helping lead the succession planning for the future, focusing on key priorities. What that means is making sure that there's good documentation, that there's a transition plan for key roles, that you're grooming people, that you're making sure that the chapter is open and welcoming to new people and new talents. And then growing activity in the 4 core areas through the chapter annual plan, as well as the governance activity with the AGM. Now, you may think, oh my goodness, there's not enough time in the day to do everything, and certainly the chapter president role is really key. But as we see on the screen here, one of our, tools is, the core chapter areas of activity and leadership roles. And while the chapter president is certainly a supporter of the raising funds, the volunteer engagement, community engagement, and patient program delivery, where you are the lead is actually in communication. Making sure that volunteers in all areas within the chapter are working collaboratively, that the left hand knows what the right hand is doing, making sure that you're a conduit for communication both to and from the staff partner and the organization, making sure that there's, relationships amongst various volunteer groups, so everybody's moving forward together. Whether or not you, for example, have any volunteer groups in your community that work outside of the chapter, like perhaps a golf tournament or a gala, or even maybe your Gutsy Walk isn't necessarily tied into the chapter, but making sure that those communications and those connections are made so that at the end of the day, we're all one team with one mission. So there's 4 success drivers that we'd like to dive into. One is the volunteer staff partnership. Another is the approvals process. Third is community activation. And fourth is the chapter annual planning tool. So the first success driver is the volunteer staff partnership. And this is really a key driver of success. And it's about our people, both volunteers and staff. For chapters, it's critical to have a strong partnership between volunteers and staff, and this means that there's an understanding that both parties play an essential and complementary role in achieving our mission. Your staff partner's role is to help the chapter plan activities for the year based on the strengths and interests of local volunteers, to ensure that local activities support organizational priorities and programs and work within our guidelines and policies, to make sure chapters have access to the information and resources needed to be successful, and to share information about training, organizational updates, guidelines and policies, materials and templates that make your work easier. Whereas on the flip side, the chapter president and other leadership volunteers' role is to work collaboratively with your staff partner to plan activities that reflect the core area of focus for chapters, to be familiar with and work within established guidelines, policies, and standards, whether that's branding or approvals or anything like that, sharing information, resources, and other important details with all volunteers in the chapter, helping us keep good, up-to-date records, whether that's for donors, for volunteers, or just an event overall, and communicating with your staff partner about obstacles, challenges, and opportunities so that you can brainstorm solutions together. Success driver as well is approvals. So as you can see on the screen, there's a number of items listed on the left-hand side, and there's on the next column a listing of whether approval is needed. And in some cases it is, and in other cases it's not. For example, if you're having a speaker come out to your local chapter meeting who is a Crohn's and Colitis Canada funded researcher, you don't need to get approval because obviously we're very supportive of their work because we're funding it. But if you're having maybe an alternative medicine practitioner or someone who's not known to us, then we do need approval, and that would go to the patient programs coordinator through your DC, so you would email your local staff partner. And the reason we ask for various timelines is because obviously we want to get back to you as soon as possible, but if someone is maybe on vacation or out of the office for some reason, or perhaps their workload is just really heavy and they're not able to respond right away, we want to make sure that you're building in that timeline into your event planning or whatever it is, so that you're not left short and we're not left not following through in the sufficient timelines. You can see that there are different emails. So for example, there's marcom at, and that would be marcom at crohnsandcolitis.ca, and same with sponsorship at and third party at. Community activation is important because being a good leader in your community, whether you're the chapter president or not, is really key to the success of the chapter. One of the chief responsibilities of a chapter president is to help build or maintain an active and engaged chapter. And chapters are really all about people. And that means creating a welcoming environment, helping people succeed by providing direction, support, guidance materials, and letting them know about training. And just to be clear, that doesn't mean that you're delivering all of the support, the guidance, the materials, and training. It means making sure that they're aware of what exists, and also flagging for your staff partner and for the volunteer engagement team where you see gaps. Ensuring there's a good fit between people and their roles. The volunteer engagement lead might be more involved on the initial uptake and orientation, but you're probably, and especially for a chapter executive member, going to see them, and so if there's issues with them maybe not following through or not really having an understanding of what their role is, then that's part of the role of the chapter president to step in and figure out whether that's a fit issue, a training issue, and working with your staff partner to address that. So we've got some ideas on the screen. So for example, making meetings welcoming could be as simple as having welcome kits handy and a designated greeter. Offering to do presentations about the disease in the organization in your local community is great for building relationships, especially with service clubs. Those are groups that are always looking for people to come out and speak. And finally, checking in with other volunteers, and if you don't have a volunteer engagement lead, making that a priority to recruit for, and really making sure that people are having a great experience with us. Finally, a new resource we've introduced in the last few years is the chapter planning tool, the chapter annual plan. And this is to be done by chapters and regional staff together to help build longer-term planning and activation in all 4 core areas of chapter activity. This tool is also a simple way to celebrate past successes and identify the resources and volunteers needed to make future plans happen. It can be also really helpful for identifying where your chapter is strong and has a lot of activity and where you might want to grow. This can become the basis for some targeted recruitment of new volunteers with the skills and interests in those areas. The chapter planning tool is best produced in conjunction with your staff partner, who can provide insights and ideas on broader regional or national activities, as well as upcoming campaigns and resources that will influence your activities. For example, if you want to do a certain event, they might say, you know what, I know another chapter in another region that has done that. I'm going to speak to their local staff partner and get more information for you. And because it's a shared plan, unlike in the past, it does not require any approvals. In partnership with the local staff, determine what time frame makes the most sense for your plan. It may start in the fall, just after chapter elections are complete, until the end of our fiscal year in June, so September to June, or you may find working on a calendar time frame of January to December better. The key is to begin looking ahead and putting in place strong plans that will lead to success. Another thing that we've updated specifically for 2018 is a step-by-step outline of how to complete the tool. And this tool is available on the Volunteer Tools page. And so it's 4 simple steps to complete the annual plan. Crohn's and Colitis Canada wants every chapter meeting to be fun, engaging, and a welcoming place for new faces. With that in mind, here's a format and structure based on the successes of existing chapters. The ideal outcomes from every chapter meeting include building community, some education, whether disease-related or organizational, sharing some organizational updates, news, and successes, and supporting people living with Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis. The format outlined above provides dedicated time and space for each of these, along with more internal business discussions specific to those volunteers who are directly involved. So, for example, you may want to, even have a bit more of a break between, in that 20-minute break social networking time to very clearly express to people that the rest of the meeting is to conduct business. It certainly doesn't stop you from having a social meeting and a business meeting if that works better for your team. One of the things we think about, and I hear from chapter presidents, is that there's not a really great turnout to meetings. And a lot of the time that's because it's the same few people around the table and you're doing the same things that you've done for many years. By adding in the piece of patient focus segment, or maybe having a speaker, having themes and topics, and advertising those on our community pages, those can be a really big draw to bringing new people out. It doesn't mean that they're going to come out to every chapter meeting, and that's okay. But if you host a session that maybe you're screening one of our existing webinars that's been done on how to travel safely when you're living with Crohn's or colitis, that can be a real draw and bring some new people out. Finally, we've got some annual key chapter dates on the screen, starting at the start of the year and running until the end. You'll be familiar with the majority of these, and these are just things to keep in mind and to add these into your local and regional events to help with planning. Finally, to find all the tools that I've described here and many more, please go to our volunteer tools page, which is under the Get Involved section under volunteers. There's over 40 pieces of tools that are available. It's really important that you're connected, that you're familiar with these things. And you could also go to crohnsandcolitiscanada.ca to learn more, and be sure to join us on social media to stay up to date and connected with everything going on across the country. Thank you so much. I hope this orientation has given you a basic foundation on what the chapter president role entails, a little bit more about what chapters should be focusing on and doing in general, and sets you up for success. Thank you so much for taking on a leadership role with Crohn's and Colitis Canada, and we can't wait to partner with you. Thank you.